let's start and talk a little bit about Clickety first. Um, Tell us about that company and what happened to have you close up shop in such a short period of time.
Yeah, the goal of the company was to help me with the problem that I struggled with the most as a
Mm,
CEO, and that was people. Your whole life is built around people, and
yeah.
I came from all the roles I'd had previously as a sysadmin, as a
Hmm.
developer. We're very tools oriented, right? If you're a sysadmin, there are a ton of great tools you can use. If you're a developer, there are billions of great tools you can use. And then suddenly I'm a CEO, and it's like, oh, by the way, you have to do all of this using post-its and Moleskine notebooks. It's like, I don't want that. I want something
Right.
much better. I want my computers to think for me. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's not an option. And so the whole time I was CEO, I was looking for things to help me do my job better, things that I could dump my brain into at the end of the day or at the end of the week, especially, and I
Hmm.
could show back up on Monday and just like load the whole thing back in again, and especially capture state so that I can stop a problem in the middle, come back later, and not have to spend 20 minutes trying to remember what the heck I was doing.
Hmm.
And I'm for whatever reason I have a real aversion to physical artifacts. Like I feel really really comfortable in the digital world, and when I write things on paper, it makes me itchy. It just there's something about there being only
Interesting.
one copy or something. I don't know exactly.
Hmm.
So I started Clickety essentially to build a productivity tool around people. So something that allowed me to, as a simple example, if you're hiring, we're used to using tools to help us track lists of candidates and stuff like that.
Applicant
Um,
tracking systems or something like that, right?
But
Yeah.
what if you're not hiring, but you're trying to find a contractor to build cabinets for you?
Hmm.
Well, like suddenly that applicant tracking system doesn't seem quite so appropriate anymore.
Right.
But you still have to call 5 or 10 or 20 people, and you still
Hmm.
have to track, where are they in the process? So what tool can you use to track, to write down like what are the steps to hiring a cabinet person and how many people are in that process? At,
Interesting.
at scale at Clickety, I had my last fundraising round. I was using Clickety to fundraise, and I had 350 people on a board spread across 15 different columns. And it was something where I could check in every single day and really, really easily get a snapshot of what's going on, who am I talking to, who have I talked to most recently, who do I need to
Hmm.
reach out to today. And at the time, yes, I was using this for fundraising, but I was using this for 5 or 6 other problems that relate to making decisions around people. Right. And how many times does not the average person, but how many times does a leader or CEO find themselves having to make a decision about who gets promoted? When did I last talk to this person?
Hmm.
Who do I need to go see in person next time? Um, who do I bring on as an advisor? There are all
Hmm.
these questions about people, and there are no tools to help us with them. So my goal with Clickety was to build that. Unfortunately, a couple things went wrong, and I'd say the dominant thing that went wrong was I I don't know if I discovered I had some or they surfaced or whatever, but it turns out I have some significant long-term health issues that prevented me from continuing to work on it. Um,
Mm.
I discovered a heart problem that's not dangerous to me, but it does limit what I can do in some ways. And it seems to be being treated with medicine right now, but it's not always clear.
Hmm.
I've got some other things going on that I'm not quite sure what the problem is. And
Hmm.
as I struggled to raise my second round, and I really did struggle to raise it, I was going to have to do an inside round, and the stress of the inside round combined with my health, I just looked up and I was like, the lines crossed at some point. It was like,
Hmm.
I can tell what this business is going to require from me, and I can't
Right.
deliver that.
Right.
And so rather than going out and raising another
Hmm.
500,000 or million or 2 million and
Hmm.
making promises and then trying to keep those promises, it's like,
Right.
I'm going to fail at this. And I don't want to throw away
Hmm.
more money, more of other people's money.
Hmm.
And I think it'd be the wrong bet for me. I spent a significant chunk of my time at Clickety. I spent a year working out of a recliner because I couldn't sit at a desk.
Oh dear.
I had to stay horizontal for my brain to work
Mm.
essentially. And it was just like, can I can I do that for another year? Can I do that for another 2 years?
Mhm.
And the answer was functionally,
Yeah.
maybe, but that was the wrong bet. And so fall of last year, I decided to close the business down. And it was
Mhm.
obviously it was sad. I missed the product all the time because there are 3 other products you might consider using that I know of that the high level marketing bit sounds really, really similar. One of them just last week shipped a feature that finally maybe will allow me to use it like I used Clickety, but you know, they're all trying to build something that sounds similar but is actually quite different. So,
Mhm.
I hope somebody goes on and does it, but at this point, the thing I was trying to do is still years away. It looks like.
Yeah. Well, and I think you make a really important point around, self care and the importance of that, right?
When I was a
It,
puppet, I ran myself ragged all the time,
I'm sure.
and I learned to, like, ride this edge. I
Hmm.
really distinctly remember realizing at night, like, because I had this habit, because I had young kids. When we raised
Hmm.
founding, I had 10-month-old twins, which I recommend separating those in the future. If you can have babies and the most intense learning and work periods of your life
At
at
different
different times,
times.
I would say that's a wise move.
Yeah.
But we just, whatever. This is how it went.
Hmm.
Um, and I distinctly remember, when my goal was to get home in time for dinner. What that meant was I worked a shorter day during the day, and then kids would
Yeah.
go to bed at 8 o'clock, and so
Right.
I would do more
Work till
email,
midnight or something like that, or
right.
whatever. Yeah.
And I just remember realizing at some point, like, I can spend more time working. I can spend another hour and a half doing
Hmm.
email, but I guarantee you that if I get up in the morning, in 15 minutes after I've slept, I'll get more work done at a higher quality than
Hmm.
if I continue working tonight. And
I'm the same way.
it's one of those, like, I will do a
Hmm.
thing that an external observer would say, yes, he worked. I replied to emails. I deleted emails. I made tasks. I
Hmm.
completed tasks. But if you were to actually observe the work done, you would see that all my emails were, I don't know, what do you think? Or let's talk about this next week. Or, it's like kicking a can down the road. I didn't
Hmm.
cause things to get done. I didn't make things happen. I just acted.
Right.
And so eventually I learned to recognize that feeling in myself of, like, hey, if you continue working, it's not going to have any value, and it's
Hmm.
going to cost me. It's going to cost you, right? Like, it's going to hurt you
Hmm.
and add no value to anybody else. So
Hmm.
you need to put your computer down. You need to go away.
Hmm.
And the worst example of that is I remember skipping out on a work event, not a puppet event, but like an industry event. And I had been traveling or something, and I was exhausted. And I sat at a bar with my wife, and I couldn't speak for an hour. And it was like, oh yeah, it's a very good thing that I did not go to this event, because, like, what would I have done? Right? Either I would have not spoken there,
Hmm.
or worse, I would have dragged even more energy that I didn't have
Hmm.
available. And then what would I have paid? How would I have paid for that later?
Hmm.
So I learned to recognize those at Puppet, because I ran myself on the edge for the entire 12 years I was there. I mean, I was on the edge of burnout, and usually the wrong edge of burnout, for the whole time. And so, I've had to be really conscious of it, because I've made that mistake too many times.
It's funny. I was talking to a founder that I know very, very well, who's invited me. He's just started a podcast. He's invited me to be on his podcast. And we had a call scheduled for whatever day it was last week, and he had sent me an email. I had told him, I said, listen, I was in an accident. I'm working from bed. I need to do a phone call instead of a Zoom call. And he responded to me, and then he called me a couple months later. He's like, "What happened? I thought we were supposed to have a call." I said, "We were. Do you not remember the email that you said, and said that would be a call would be fine?" He goes, "Oh." He says, "Did I send it like in the middle of the night?" I said, "Yes." It came in at 2 a.m. And he said to me, he's always trying to figure out like different ways to work that are effective for him, right?
Right.
To your point, working all the time. And he says, it's like I send stuff in the middle of the night and then I have no recollection of it. I'm like, well, then you need to stop working in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Hey,
That is just not,
doctor, it hurts when I do this. Maybe
that's
don't
right.
do that anymore.
Yeah, don't do that anymore. Exactly. So I think that, you're making some, I mean, really, really, I think salient points that any founders or entrepreneurs listening really need to pay attention to,
I think
which
so.
is you cannot, he refers to it as being a founder is lonely AF, right?
It, I
And
totally
and
agree.
it often is. You're working a lot of hours. You spend a good bit of time by yourself, like especially if you're working, from home, at crazy hours. And, by not taking care of your own needs, it's not effective to building a successful company. I know for me, there's certain times where my brain works much better, and that's in the mornings.
Yep.
I just by the end of the day, I mean, I can maybe edit something, but I can't do any writing at all.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's got their own circadian
That's
rhythm
right.
that their bodies work well on, and
Hmm.
powering through it is a great
Hmm.
way to do shitty work and set a bad example for everyone around you.
Exactly. You're exactly right. So let me ask you this, Luke. Um, Did you have so that second round that you were was this seed round that you were getting that you were
Essentially, I mean, I
going
did
for that
on
you decided not to
yeah,
get
we'd probably call the first round a pre-seed, and then the second one I was
pre-seed and seed?
trying to
Yeah,
do a
okay,
seed, but I got 100 no's, and the no's were all really similar. They say, there's all these stories of, oh, you just need one person to say yes, but the no's were sufficiently similar that it just did not seem like continuing to do the same thing was going to get an outcome. And plus, I ran out of time, right? Like I fundraised for 3 months, and I thought I started plenty early, but at some point you look up and you're like, look, I've got 3 weeks of cash, and my team, at the point I had 4 employees. And it's like I,
good,
I
yeah.
need to, I can't keep telling them, give me another month or whatever.
Hmm.
So I had to shift modes at that point.
Hmm. What do you think was causing all the no's? Like what was missing, and was
Um,
there anything missing?
yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. Now, obviously, I've got a story to tell, and my story is biased.
Hmm.
Now, the difference between my bias and everybody else's bias is obviously that I'm right. But beyond that,
We all like to be right.
right. So I'll just like say that up front. Like I recognize that I have a perspective that I'm bringing, and my perspective
Right.
is, you know, necessarily different. Right. If I had the
Hmm.
same perspective as everybody else, I wouldn't be a terribly good entrepreneur.
Well,
Um, I
and
I
you
think it was
operate through your own filters also.
right. I think it was
Yeah.
fundamentally two things. The first and the major reason why everyone said they said no, the most common reason
Hmm.
was essentially that something that smells and sounds like this has been talked about a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean like a personal CRM type thing.
Right.
But I've used all those tools. I've talked about all those tools, and um, none of them were actually quite trying to do what I'm trying to do. Most of them were
Hmm.
glorified address books. They were like, how do I bring the address book into the modern age?
Hmm.
And one of the foundational concepts behind Clickety is that the whole idea of the address book is obsolete. The thing we needed address books for in the 80s was literally, where do I write down your address so that when I need it, I can find it? Where do I write down your phone number?
Hmm.
Well, our phones do that for us really transparently right now. Like
Hmm.
that's not a hard problem. The hard problem is I'm a professional who regularly deals with 5,000 individual people on an annual basis. And
Hmm.
on a weekly or monthly basis, I will deal with 100 to 200 individual people, 50 to 75% of whom might be completely new to me, but 50 to 75% might be people who I see once a year or 3 times a year. How do I ensure that I'm doing the right things with the right
Hmm.
people at the right
Hmm.
time? And how do
Hmm.
I reduce the cost of decision making around those people?
Hmm.
Because as a CEO, 95% of what you do is decide, make decisions about
Hmm.
people, right? I'm not deciding about product. I'm deciding about who is going to decide about product. I'm not deciding
Right.
about sales. I'm
Right.
deciding
Right.
who is going to decide about sales.
Hmm.
Where are my tools for making those decisions? And I could never successfully express to other people in a way that they got it
Hmm.
how that was different from an address book. And
Well, yeah, that's interesting because as I was listening to you describe it, I'm thinking, well, this sounds like it's part CRM, right? And I wonder, listening to you talk about this, if that's where the institutional capitalists were thinking, well, it's just another glorified CRM. Why do we need it?
nobody went there.
Nobody
Um,
went there. That's
no,
interesting. Okay.
well, the reason nobody went there is that 100% of the people I talked to have tried to use their CRM to do this, and none of them
And
work.
they can't do it. Okay.
Right. And so, in a lot of ways, you're right. The How I came to think of this is you need a more generic CRM, because if you
Hmm.
try to use a CRM for this, try to use whether it's Salesforce or Copper, or anything that
Whatever. Yeah.
whether you use the high end or the low end, and I've tried them
Hmm.
all. What you'll find is that CRM has a frame, and you're like, okay, I need to have a conversation with every member of my like director team, right? I've got 50 directors work at the company, and I need to have a 3-part conversation with each of them, right? I need to check in with them first, and then I
Hmm.
need to have an intensive what's your future look
Hmm.
like, and then I need to follow up, right?
Yeah.
And that's 50 people, 3 stages,
Hmm.
150 individual items that I need to go through, right? And that
Hmm.
machine is really hard, right? And of course, I can hand that to my EA and she can run that process, but
Hmm.
she's going to struggle too, right? And if I ask her, hey, show me what the status is, she's going to be like, oh, well, you can't look at the sausage, right? I've got a machine, I got a thing that works for me, but I can't show it to you because it won't work for you,
Hmm.
right? So it's not something we can collaborate on. It's not something I can work with, or I can't take pieces of it. So uh, then if you go in and you say, okay, I'm going to use Salesforce to do this because Salesforce is really good at building pipelines and I can
Hmm.
build stages. And Salesforce is like, all right, the first thing I need you to answer is how much money are you going to make from this director who works for you next week? Like, well, no money. I pay the guy. Like, I'm not going to
Right.
make that. Doesn't, it's a nonsensical question, but the
Hmm.
frame of CRM is so built around
Yeah.
how much money are you going to make from them when, that
Mhm.
even if that's what you're trying to do, but not in a sales way,
Mhm.
it still doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for partnership deals. It doesn't work for,
Well, right, because I mean, it's a pipeline, and if you don't have any way to say, well, this is what my pipeline looks like, then it seems like a moot point.
yeah. So they've all tried it. So they didn't go
Yeah.
to CRM. What they did is they said, why is this going to succeed where, and now I'm going to blank on all of where contactually failed? Why is this going to succeed where, the 4 or 5 other companies that vaguely resembled us?
Mhm.
And the answer is contactually didn't really try to do this, right? Contactually built a better address book. And that's what essentially all of them did. And, but again, I failed to express to them in a way that they understood. Now,
Well,
what is the
and that's what I was wondering if it was actually in your messaging.
there is a very good chance that that is the case, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm fully willing to say there was a way of explaining it, and I did not discover that way.
Yeah.
I do find the hardest part of the kind of business I build, which is I almost exclusively am interested in new markets.
Yeah.
I don't like competition. I don't like doing something that somebody else is
You want to
already
do a blue
doing.
ocean.
Right. And part of that is
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm excellent at some things, but I'm not somebody who's like, I'm gonna out execute you, or I'm gonna, it's much more like, look, 5 people are working on that. Why would I work on that? Like that's gonna get solved. I'm
Mhm.
much more interested in what other problems that I think are really important that no one else agrees are important. And
Mhm.
Puppet was a good example of that, where like the industry as a whole thought the idea of Puppet was stupid. And I had multiple people tell me, like, this is dumb. Why are you doing this? And it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and so and that speaks to, I think, the second problem, which is VCs really struggle with market creation. Every VC would like to take out both the market risk and the execution risk. And of
Yeah,
course,
good
if you
luck with
do that,
that.
right, like, but of them,
It wouldn't be
they're much,
gambling then, would it?
right. They're just
Yeah.
uncomfortable with market. They're less
Yeah.
comfortable with market risk than they are with other risks,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, look, if you could prove to me that this market could be built and would be large, then I would invest. And I'm like, if I could
Mhm.
prove that to you, then I wouldn't need your money. Like,
You'd bootstrap, yeah, right.
right? If I could look back in time and say, look, the data is here.
Yeah.
And ironically, the people who I was kind of theoretically competing with, which is like Dex and Clay and Folk,
Mm.
um, they have really big user bases and they're getting a lot of interestingness. But I think they're going to all hit that same asymptote that Contactually did in the generation before,
Mhm.
because I think they're just a better way of solving that exact same problem. And I think that's
Mhm.
nice, but I don't think it's anywhere near as valuable as what I was trying to solve,
Mhm. Yeah.
because I just think it's a smaller problem. I don't think it's as
Yeah.
useful.
Carol Schultz here. Thanks for watching this excerpt from Authentically Successful. The conversation doesn't end there. So if you want to hear this episode in full and all my conversations with many other successful founders and CEOs, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast.